First Peoples Fund invests in the creative spirit of Indigenous artists and culture bearers. That came together during the grand opening of the Oglala Lakota Artspace last month, which brought the community together in Kyle, South Dakota. The space features studios for artists, crafts, and musicians. Lori Pourier is president and CEO of First Peoples Fund. ICT Shirley Snavy asked her to reflect on her career and impact.
I've been doing this work my whole life. With First Peoples Fund, I joined First Peoples Fund in 1998, and First Peoples Fund was founded by a woman named Jennifer Easton, who had a donor-advised fund at the Tides Foundation in the San Francisco Bay Area, and she was trying to do micro-lending in Indian country, and it was really hard to, be based in San Francisco with a non-native person, leading the work in an institution that didn't know Indian country. And so they were making loans and they weren't being paid off. So I had met Kalima Rose, who was a part of some earlier work I did with the Indigenous Women's Network and was at the Tides Foundation as well. And so they brought me on, knowing my work with, earlier work with First Nations Development Institute and the Indigenous Women's Network. So that's how this work came to be. So I always say that the work extends before First Peoples Fund, because First Nations and our work there with Rebecca Adamson and Sherry Salway Black and Elsie Meeks and others, Gerald Sherman, we launched the Lakota Funds here on Pine Ridge. And during that time, my Uncle Richard did a research study through the Aspen Institute, and it was around the flow of funds and how money's distributed in local economies. And at that time, and it must have been probably 87 or so, 97 cents of the dollar was being circulated outside of this local economy. And so Lakota Funds was born and, really making loans to artists. So my grandma, Olivia Blackout Pourier, was one of the first ones to get a loan from the Lakota Funds in making quilts and to sell those quilts throughout the reservation to make quilts for graduation and other things. And as I said, 97 cents of that dollar was circulating outside of the local economy. And the major form of commerce here in the community was the government sector, right? So that's why Lakota Funds was born here on Pine Ridge, to just help build business. And Ivan Sorbo from the Pine Ridge Area Chamber of Commerce, who we've also been working with for a very long time, he said there was over 700 and some businesses now here, I believe, on Pine Ridge. So, that trajectory is a contribution of everybody, right, in terms of even the trajectory of the work with First Peoples Fund. So we had enough data, in advance to know why we should do the work we're doing at First Peoples Fund. So when we started First Peoples Fund in 1998, 1999, we convened not only artists, but we also brought in Lakota Funds, the other CDFIs. Aloise Cabal was involved with the earlier work, Elsie Meeks and others. And, because we knew that we wanted to also utilize their services, those informal networks and those networks that existed that would help businesses. So somewhere around 2011, we did our own research, and we partnered with a national organization called Artspace out of Minneapolis, and Kelly Lindquist is the founder of Artspace, one of the founders, and they had spaces all over the country. So we knew in our own research on the creative economy that there were specific needs for artists, because we did deep research all across this reservation and trying to figure out how to support artists as entrepreneurs. And we knew from that research that 51% of the households were engaged in some sort of home-based practice. And that was an extension from that earlier report I mentioned. It was a very active informal sector economy, they used to call it. And so, but from that 51%, 79% of those were engaged in some sort of tradition-based practice. So, mentioning my grandma, Olivia Blackout, she was a quilter. And she was busy all time, all the way right up to graduation, right? We all have the grandmas, the aunties, and all them that make the quilts for the community so everybody can have their quilts for graduation. And so we also knew that later research that we did, that 40%, of those households in this economy were actually traditional artists. And so we really wanted to support community-based artists and helping them grow their business. And we started to do that work, and we've done it here since. And there were about 6 areas of needs in our surveys and interviewing artists. So it was access to informal networks, it was access to supplies, access to capital, and materials. I mean, there was six different areas of support, but the distribution networks that support artists to do business. And we also knew that the CDFIs didn't have that knowledge of the distribution networks that support artists. So we needed other artists to teach emerging artists in communities like Pine Ridge, to be their mentors, like Donald Montello, who we honor today and recognize today, and Richard Red Owl and others. We needed them to mentor the young folks, because we also saw at the time many of those mentors now today that are elderly, they were the ones that were relocating and moving to the Southwest to make a living from their art. And so that's when we said we need to identify those that have moved away to come home, not come home, but be mentors, because they had been, have family now in the Southwest and all of that. So Don Montello and Linda Zabel and Paul Zabel and others have contributed heavily to coaching and mentoring and working with the young artists. So we did that work for many years, and then we also have a national fellowship program, in supporting artists as leaders, business leaders. And so then came the building in probably about 2013, right after the study. We really started to look at that area of space and how do we identify and support artists in this community, because we were hearing that they needed, everyone was kind of, that were practicing artists. Of that 41%, we all have those aunties and uncles, and you eat your dinner, make your dinner, and then you got to finish that beadwork, that quill work, the quilt, and so then everybody cleans off the kitchen table, and then you're visiting with family, right, making and creating till midnight or whatever to get ready for the show or to get ready for the tribe to purchase some art or whatever. So that's how we focused on the Oglala Lakota Artspace. Our dreams are actualizing right now. Our dreams are beginning to actualize, and you can see it today here in the space. People from all over the res community of artists, the young people are in charge of this building, the poets, the spoken word poets. Young Autumn White Eyes, who grew up in our program as a high school student, now leads that work. And so we have active poetry writing here. We have the Dances with Words program, of which the young people named. We have studio spaces for artists, so the hip hop artists are coming in, and these are often the young folks that are the creatives, in tribal community, but don't always have the same resources. They're not the basketball players. They're not they're not in that trajectory. They're the ones that your spirits need to be fulfilled just by creating art. So that's what, to me, that's what the dream is here for Oglala Lakota Artspace. So those next generation, we honored Richard and Donald today, and Cecilia Fire Thunder and others. And that's what Richard said, Red Owl, we need to step back because the young ones now are leading. And you can see it, all of them out here today at the Oglala Lakota Artspace. They're all creating, making, and selling work much different than we saw 23 years ago now, because they're all doing it online. They're all staying home in community and marketing and selling and distributing their work through social media and other ways. So we give them the space to not only create here, but to access all those other areas of needs for artists.